Hey everyone, welcome to the final installment of today's Dan and Joe Game Day, Grove Day from Oxford, with them having their first college game day at Ole Miss since 2014, the legendary Katy Perry game. And we're going to begin this one with giving you our lines of the week. Now, I got to say, if you listen to this right now and you run out to the Bow in Biloxi, you want to go up to Tunica, or if you're out in Vegas, you still got time to put those last bets in before 11 a.m. And Joe and I are going to give you some locks. And Joe, Dan's lock of the week on this, it's been one that I've been rolling with all season. And Joe, I hate to get on your hometown team to make fun of Seymour DeCampus, which, by the way, I got to say is a terrible name for a mascot. I'm sorry, Joe. Got to throw that out there. But to get on the Seymour DeCampus and talk about the struggles of Southern Miss football. But let me tell you this, Joe, I've been fading Southern Miss all year. It's been lying in my pocket. And again, got to bet against Southern Miss. They're playing Texas San Antonio today. UTSA, of course, is an undefeated team right now. Their coach, Coach Traylor, was heavily sought after, and I think a lot of people thought he was going to get a good Power 5 job. But kudos to UTSA. They locked him up with a big deal. A lot of excitement in Roadrunner land right now. And I believe that UTSA is favored over Southern Miss. And let's see what I had them at. I had it at 33 points. And Joe, that's a big line. But Southern Miss this year has just been getting skull drugged by everybody. It's a bad football team. And what makes it worse is it's a disheartening football team because their defense isn't terrible, but their offense is an utter train wreck.
Yep. And they're starting, I think I told you, a walk-on quarterback.
Yeah. And so, Joe, I like the Roadrunners today to run all over Southern Miss. And I say lay the 33 points with UTSA and keep on fading the Southern Miss, Golden Eagles, and Seymour DeCampus today.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's going to be the case for Southern Miss and in favor of UTSA. The one I'm going with for my line of the week, I'm looking at the ACC and the NC State at Wake Forest matchup. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I loved the Wake Forest story. I love seeing Sam Hartman put up great numbers this year. But I just really feel like this is the type of team that, yeah, they were 8-0, but now that they lost the game the way they did, coughing up the big 18-point lead in the second half to North Carolina, I kind of feel like they're going to be in free fall maybe for a couple of weeks, unfortunately. And I like NC State to win this game. I think I saw where Wake Forest is favored by 2 or 2.5, but no, I like NC State to win this game on the road.
I think that's a solid pick. NC State is one of the more talented teams in the ACC. They've got SEC level talent in a lot of places, including on the offensive line and defensive line. And I think what Dave Doran has done there, he's built a pretty good program over there at NC State. They've been consistently good. Beat Clemson for the first time in many years this year. Had a decent chance at winning their division in the ACC. And the biggest problem I've had with Wake Forest watching them all season, Joe, is they have an electric offense. Like, it's a beautiful offense to watch. They put up points against everybody, but they have an atrocious, MAC level defense or something. I mean, it's a bad defense. Joe, I watched Army put up, I think, 59 points against them. And so that's not a good matchup when you're taking on a team that does have a solid defense and also a pretty good offense. I think that you have a good pick here. I think NC State wins. I think money line's a good pick on this one.
Isn't weird to see Wake Forest having this type of offense, because they used to be like the defensive team when they had Riley Skinner the year. I think they won the Orange Bowl or went to the Orange Bowl.
They went to the Orange Bowl.
When they had a defensive team that really kind of locked down on Georgia Tech and Calvin Johnson in the ACC championship game.
Yeah, Joe, I always remember that game because I do this bowl pool every year. There's a lot of people involved in it in Mobile, and I think the return is a couple grand. And the closest I ever got to winning it was the year that Riley Skinner was with Wake Forest, and it all came down to that bowl game because I had points on Wake Forest. And if Wake Forest had beat Louisville, then coached by Bobby Petrino, I would have won the bowl pool, but then they ultimately failed against Louisville. So I've always had a little bit of a grudge against Wake Forest football because of that.
And this is the first time I feel like we probably anybody's talked about them in 14 years.
This is probably the first time that I brought that up since then. Yes. But yes, I like taking the Wolfpack on this one. All right, Joe. Today, there's a lot of good games kind of spread throughout the day, but we got one coming up in just under an hour that, of course, involves my team, and that's Auburn and Mississippi State. Auburn gets to return home after a grueling road trip to College Station and what was a lit atmosphere in Aggie Land. I think I saw some stats that it was like one of the top 5 biggest crowds they've ever had at Texas A&M for a football game, and obviously that had some effect on Bo and Auburn's offense. They get to come back to the friendly confines of Jordan-Hare Stadium, but it's for an 11 a.m. game. And, Joe, I can say this. The atmosphere at 11 a.m. games may not be like this everywhere, but at Auburn, it's not near the same as what you get for a 2:30 or a 6 or a 7. It makes a big difference, and I've been to a lot of 11 a.m. games that Auburn lost. Auburn is a very, very tough place to play at 2:30 and 6, and not many people ever get wins there. But your chances go up a lot at 11. So I want to start this off by saying I think the home field advantage is not going to be near as much as what you generally see for an Auburn game.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I remember like the time Ole Miss beat them there, really the only time in the last 15 years outside of Eli Manning was an 11 o'clock kickoff 6 years ago. So I think that's a really good point. I kind of feel like with this game, it's hard to get a read on it because State is coming in with a lack of momentum as well after that heartbreaking loss to Arkansas when they couldn't make the field goals last week in Fayetteville. And we, of course, saw Mike Leach put out that he's opening up kicking tryouts for anybody so they can get a place kicker. So that always concerns me when a team's going on the road and they have kicking concerns because then you're just kind of giving away points. I feel like these games between what I would call kind of a finesse offense in Mississippi State with a passing attack with Will Rogers against an Auburn team that always has good defense, always has a good running game. I kind of feel like those games tend to be decided in the trenches more times than not, and the team that's more physical usually wins. And so I will lean Auburn, I believe, for that reason.
Yes, Joe, I think that's a big stat right there. Auburn's secondary may be the best secondary in the SEC, and that's the biggest advantage I give. You look at Auburn, Roger McCreary right now is listed as a top 15 draft prospect. I like Roger McCreary. He's from Mobile. Done a lot. He's earned his way up there, and he's a senior. He's a graduate, just a really solid young man. And, of course, you got Smoke Monday back there too. And the secondary, I think, for Auburn is going to make the difference because they're playing a team that passes all the time. And not only that, Auburn's got good covering cornerbacks who are just ball hawks, and Zacoby McClain, who led the nation in tackles last year, and Owen Papo, who's finally coming back from his injuries they sustained against Penn State. And you saw it with Auburn's defense last week. I mean, A&M is not a great offense by any means, but Auburn gave up 0 offensive touchdowns to them. They gave up 0 offensive touchdowns to the vaunted Ole Miss defense in the second half. So they're running on 6 quarters of no touchdowns. And I don't think this style of offense is going to do much to Auburn. And so I think the defense is going to be what makes the difference today. And I think that Bo's going to have a little bit of a comeback effort. And I think they're going to focus more on running the football, which Mississippi State's got a good run defense, but Arkansas last week exposed them a little bit. And so I think you're going to see Tank and Jarquez have a good game today.
Yeah, that's the big other storyline too, like the Auburn running game against Mississippi State's defense. And you feel like, Jarquez and with Tank Bigsby, I mean, that's just a decided advantage because when Mississippi State, is on offense, Will Rogers is probably going to throw 50 times today. And you feel like the way Mike Leach's offense is predicated, they'll throw those screen passes and little check downs in lieu of a running game, almost like to compensate for the lack of a running game. And that usually doesn't bode very well on the road.
And it really doesn't bode well when you have stellar linebackers that'll knock that down within 3 yards. And I think that's going to be a problem. And, Joe, you mentioned the field goal kicker. I mean, Auburn has been a bend but don't break defense. They give up a lot of yards. They let you get in the red zone. But lately, once they've gotten down there, they've locked down. And you can ask Lane Kiffin about choosing to go forward on 4th down against Auburn and how that turns out. So I'm worried about Mississippi State when they get in the red zone and they get stopped, which they will.
Yeah, it's like they can't even make a decision on whether to kick a field goal because
they just got to go.
They'll miss it So there you go.
So I think red zone points is going to be the biggest thing. And Joe, ultimately, like Auburn by 10 points in this. I'm going to say Auburn wins 27-17.
Okay, I'll say Auburn 27-20.
Okay. I think we're pretty close on that, but I think that's going to be a good game. But I think Auburn gets that win and keeps their hopes alive, and hopes that the other side of the coin, Ole Miss, gets it done, which we'll talk about in a little bit. All right, Joe, moving on. Let's talk about those Spoilermakers. They got their third opportunity to take down another Big Ten power in top 5, Ohio State. This is going to be their biggest challenge yet. They've taken down an upstart Iowa. They beat Iowa down. They completely contained Kenneth Walker, got a big time W against Michigan State, fresh off them getting their big win over Michigan. And suddenly they got their third time to be a top 5 team, taking on Ohio State in the shoe. Do you think the Spoilermakers got one more in them, Joe?
I think they have a good chance to cover and cover the spread and to win by, maybe just like 2 touchdowns, 10, or to lose by 2 touchdowns,
Yeah.
10 points, to make it a competitive game. But at the end of the day, I do think Ohio State will win this at home. I think that C.J. Stroud will have some good offensive numbers, and I think that being in that environment will be a little bit too much for Purdue.
I agree, Joe. I think that Purdue is a very good football team. I think even if they lost this game in my expanded, 12-team playoff, I like putting them in. I think you get 3 wins over a top 5 team, or 2 wins over a top 5 team, you're good enough to be in the top 12 to me. This Ohio State team, I think, is going to be a little too much, especially since it's going to be at home in the Horseshoe. Purdue really benefited a lot from their home crowd last week against Michigan State. Of course, they rushed the field, and it looks like it's kind of a cool little place to watch a football game. This is going to be a rough environment. Ohio State, I kind of wish for Purdue that Ohio State would have gone out and just drubbed Nebraska last week, because Nebraska pushed Ohio State, and I think that got their focus back. And when you have teams that are uber talented like this Ohio State team, generally when they get pushed by a team that's not on their level, they go out and take care of business the next week.
Yeah. Kind of puts them on alert.
It puts them on alert. Now, I think 20 points is really rich. I think that it's a good play to take Purdue on the points here. In all honesty, Joe, from a value perspective, because I keep picking Purdue on the money line and they keep doing it, I did it this week because it paid out 8-1. I don't think it's going to work, but I think from a value perspective, it's worth it if you're a bettor to go ahead and just take Purdue on the money line because the return is so great. Just don't put up a lot of money on it.
Yeah, I mean, if Oregon can go into Columbus and win, you feel like this Purdue team can definitely make this a competitive game.
All right, Joe, speaking of lit Big Ten atmospheres, we're going to have one today that I think is going to be great. And it's got to be a night game, but having gone to Beaver Stadium myself in the beginning of this year, it is a special place to watch a football game. Penn State, of course, since that big win against Auburn on game day, struggled a little bit. And I think a lot of that is because they were so dependent upon their great senior veteran leader, Sean Clifford. And when he got injured, because Will Levis had transferred to Kentucky, they were very poor at the backup quarterback position. And you saw it in losses to Illinois and then what they've done since then, of course, not getting it done against Ohio State. I know that Sean Clifford was back, but I still doubt that he was at 100%. And of course, what happened against them when they played Iowa, when they had that lead with Clifford in the game, they were winning by 14 points. And then when Clifford got hurt, of course, they couldn't do anything against that very good Iowa defense. Now, Clifford supposedly is fully healthy. The game's at Beaver Stadium. Michigan, of course, a lot of people felt they got jobbed by the refs in that game against Michigan State, it was such a great matchup. And even Harbaugh says the Big Ten has apologized. The Big Ten officials have apologized to Harbaugh about what happened. And so I think Michigan's starting to get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. You saw the College Football Playoff Committee actually put them ahead of Michigan State when Michigan State lost to Purdue last week. But the question is, Joe, ref screw job or no ref screw job, can Harbaugh win the big game on the road, and especially in a place like Happy Valley? What do you think?
I mean, probably not is kind of my inclination, because this is kind of the game he historically loses, this type of game at Michigan. And so I just think in this environment, look for Penn State to more than likely win the game. And that would put Penn State, at 7-3, trying to kind of salvage what was really a very promising season at the beginning. And then Michigan would fall to 8-2 and then be eliminated from the college football playoff.
Yeah, Joe, I really like Penn State on this one. This is another one of my plays I had. Their home field advantage is amazing. I think there's going to be a lot of focus this week. A lot of people were talking about how James Franklin seemed kind of aloof last week, that he obviously is looking for another job because he didn't even remember who they were playing. He said they were going to the Big House when they were going to the Shoe. Big House, of course, is Michigan's stadium, and they were going to play Ohio State at the Horseshoe. And he just seemed like he wasn't really all there. They played a pretty good game against Ohio State. Like, they pushed them and they were within one score for a lot of the game. And I think that these other jobs, these LSU and USC jobs, first off, I've said it, after I went to Penn State, I think he'd be a fool to leave that. I think it's a great football place. And I think he works up there. I think that's a good thing. And so I think that he's going to have a renewed focus, a renewed, satisfaction where he is, and understanding that he's probably not the guy these other schools are looking at. And I think he's going to, put back into Penn State and realize that's his place. And I think he's going to coach a great game today. I like the Nittany Lions to win this game straight up.
Yeah, that's kind of what I see too. I would go Penn State wins like 31 to 20.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a little bit more points scored in this. I think Clifford's health is good. And I want you to watch, if you and I are both right and Penn State wins, Jahan Dotson. Jahan Dotson, I think, is the best receiver in America. I watched him in person, and he's electric, man. He runs it well. He makes fantastic catches. And, Joe, he can throw it too. I watched him throw a pass against Auburn, and it was beautiful. And so I think Jahan Dotson has a huge game today. I like Penn State to win this game 28-27.
Okay. No, that certainly sounds like an exciting game.
Absolutely. Joe, go into a game that's going to be exciting, not because of the fact that it's going to come down to it, but exciting more because of the trajectory of a program. Let's talk about Georgia and Tennessee. Georgia's going to go into that scary Neyland Stadium atmosphere, avoiding trash and everything, and take on an upstart Tennessee program fresh off their big win, 45-42. And, of course, Joe, we were talking about how I went to that Morgan Wallen concert last night. I actually got myself some Tennessee protection for if I ever go to a game. I bought this Morgan Wallen shirt. He's a big Tennessee fan that's got the orange and white checkerboard pattern but spells out Morgan Wallen. And so I figure if I ever go to an Ole Miss or an Auburn game in Knoxville, I'll just wear that shirt. And I'm not wearing a Tennessee thing, but I'm also not wearing an Auburn or Ole Miss thing that's going to get me a can of mustard thrown in my head.
Yeah, that's definitely clever to do that one to avoid golf balls as well.
Golf balls, yes. I think that's going to give me, versus wearing a helmet, I think that's a better way to do it. And so with that being said, Georgia's going to go into a live atmosphere. Tennessee fans are so excited. It's the first time they could be optimistic in what, Joe, legitimately 18 years. It's good. I mean, I've never been the biggest Tennessee fan, but it's kind of nice to see them being good again. They have a really exciting offense. I think Heupel has got a great game plan with the way he's using Hendon Hooker and really using a receiving core that's been depleted and getting a good running attack that lost Todd Chandler to North Carolina. And Tennessee right now looks like the best offense that Georgia will have played the entire season. And so I'm excited to see whether Tennessee can go out there and score 20 or 24 points today and put up a respectable performance.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at too, is how Tennessee looks. It's not about the outcome of the game, because we'd all be shocked if Georgia loses this game and doesn't win, but how good does Tennessee's offense look? Because that kind of, plays into the narrative of how invincible Georgia's defense is.
That's correct.
Season. If Tennessee goes out and scores 20 plus points or more against Georgia, suddenly that kind of opens the door for people that are going to play Georgia, the latter part of the season or the SEC championship game or the playoff. But if Georgia goes out and, let's say they don't allow Tennessee to score an offensive touchdown in that environment, the way Tennessee's offense has been playing, that would certainly be kind of suffocating to everybody's chances on to score.
Joe, the most depressing thing for all college football fans that have a team that could win the national championship would be if they watch that Tennessee-Georgia game today and Georgia beats them like 38-3.
Right, precisely.
So, yeah, this is definitely a big game for Georgia with how do they handle business. If they go out there and they shut down what is a very live Tennessee offense in a great environment, then yeah, I don't see anybody even coming close to them. So that's going to be a big question. I think here's a number I'm going to throw out to you, Joe. 38-20. If you're a Tennessee fan and you lose 38-20, how do you feel?
I mean, I'd say you feel like you scored. You'd feel more respectable. You would not hate that outcome. Yeah, that's so much better than going out there and not scoring any points. But it's also better to me. Like, I would rather lose a game by 18 than I would lose a game by like one possession.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. In my mind, I put that as the baseline if I'm a Tennessee fan as to, okay, I'm respecting what our performance is. And I think that people around the nation are going to be pretty happy with what we did.
Yeah, the games that you love as a fan, if you have to lose, are the respectable blowouts.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the game, the Auburn Penn State game, I didn't mind losing that one the way it went down. I felt they were better than us. It was a close game, but I never have any, heartache over it. That was one that for some reason, I don't know, maybe it was just the whole experience made it to where I wasn't upset about it.
Yeah.
Joe, speaking of the last one today, now this is going to be one that's going to be upset if I don't have it go the way I want. We got the big game, college game day, Ole Miss taking on Texas A&M. Joe, I don't know if they've announced who the celebrity picker is yet, but who would you want it to be?
I would say that it would make a lot of sense to have Eli Manning since they retired his number earlier this season.
That's kind of what I was thinking. That's probably the route they're going to go. But either Eli or Archie for it. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere. Obviously, it's good to see Kiffin's gotten Ole Miss back to the point where they can have a game like this. The biggest question to me is the wide receiver depth for Ole Miss. I know we've been missing a lot of guys. That's why we've had to have Pearson start being one of our receivers. Who do we got back left, Joe? And is there any improvement? I mean, is Drummond going to be there? Are we going to have Sanders? What's the deal with the injured receivers?
So they're still obviously without Mingo, not even sure if he's going to come back this season. That's a huge loss in itself. And then you have Drummond may play tonight. I'm still not sure about his status. Sanders, I think, will play. But what he's been doing the last few weeks is pretty much playing sparingly and only playing in red zone situations because he just can't run that much and he can't create that much separation. But if he can be kind of a red zone target, almost like a backup tight end in those situations. And so you have those injuries, and then you have kind of a hobbled Matt Corral playing off of two kind of sore ankles. And so that makes it tough for Ole Miss. Now, the good news for Ole Miss, surprisingly, is that they've had some good defensive efforts up and down throughout the season at times. Sam Williams is putting up just outstanding numbers as a sack guy on defense. He's got like already 10.5 sacks. I think he's already set an Ole Miss single season record at this point in the season.
Joe, I think that is a big feather in Ole Miss's cap against what is a good offensive line for A&M, but a young one. They've got a lot of injuries, and I think there's like 3 or 4 freshmen playing on the offensive line at Texas A&M. Auburn was able to get some pressure against Calzada. They never sacked him, but they got some good hits on him. I think that Ole Miss has a chance to put a hurt on Calzada today and get a good pass rush.
I think so too. And that's really the key because you're not going to be able to stop Spiller and company. I mean, that running game is really good for A&M. You got to just kind of try to slow them up, just mitigate them as much as possible. But you're right. The key is getting that pressure to Calzada, not letting him do a lot with his arm. And then just the offense is going to have to play mistake-free football if you're Ole Miss. You can't expect Matt Corral to light up the stat sheet and throw, for 350 yards, but you got to avoid the interceptions because I referenced in one of our earlier podcasts today that A&M, one of the best defensive units in the country, number 2 in scoring defense in the country at like under 15 points a game allowed. We saw what they've done to Auburn. We saw what they've done to a lot of teams this year. And so I think that Matt Corral this season has played great as far as limiting turnovers with only 2 interceptions. That's got to continue.
Yes. All right, Joe, let's get to the picks. I'm going to pick the upset, and I like the Rebs to win this game at home because of the defense. I'm actually predicting that you get a little bit of karmic retribution for last week, and I think Ole Miss gets a defensive touchdown off a strip sack on Calzada, and that they actually do kick a couple field goals today against a good defense that Lane throws away the analytics book for a little bit. And I think they have a conservative game plan to where they throw the ball more. They don't run Corral as much. And I see Calzada making some mistakes. I think he's a limited quarterback. And with the pass rush and the mistakes of what is a very limited Texas A&M passing attack, I think Ole Miss gets the win 27-24.
Okay. Now that would certainly be a phenomenal game and what's going to be a great environment. One of the biggest games in Oxford, in the last 6 years. I think here's the way I see the pathway for Ole Miss to have a chance. I feel like you got to cut down on any mistakes and turnovers, obviously.
Absolutely.
Yes. But the other thing is they've got to have, more consistent production from the running attack because you have Jerry on Ely. We talked about the depth of this, running core with a running backs core with Ely and Connor and Parrish, all those guys. But we got to see more consistency from Ely specifically. He's had a couple of games this year where he just wasn't even present on the field. Like he's maybe had, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was against Auburn with somebody. He had less than 5 rushing yards the entire game. Just did not show up at all. And he's got to have some steady production to take some pressure off of Matt Corral because if Corral's having to throw the ball 40 plus times, and that's just a recipe for a disaster. And that's when the turnovers are going to happen if you're Ole Miss. And so at the end of the day, Dan, I kind of feel like I've got to lean towards A&M in this game because I do think they're going to get pressure to Corral. And I think it's going to make it hard on him to complete passes. I think we could see some sacks by that A&M defense. And I think that A&M's running game and their ability to be an offense that probably goes in there and eats some clock and, wins the time of possession could allow them to win this game. And so I'll go Texas A&M wins 24-21.
Okay. Well, Joe, I think, it's a coin flip kind of game. I'll give you 2 things. If Ole Miss wins, I think Pearson has a big game because one thing I noticed last week, if you got a good quarterback and you got capable receivers, the back end of A&M's defense is susceptible to the long ball. They don't play really great defense on deep passes. And so right now with the injuries that they have at Ole Miss, Pearson's probably the best deep threat right now for Ole Miss. They need him to get over his dropsies he's had the last couple of weeks, and he's going to be open on some long balls. So I think he could be a huge player in this game. And I want to throw something else out there for you, Joe, 150 yards. If Ole Miss gets more than 150 yards rushing, they win this game. And I think if they go under, they probably lose. That's the number I'm putting. I think they need over 150 to get the dub today.
I think so. And on the flip side, I'll also be watching to see, what A&M does as far as rushing production. If either team can get over 150, that may be very well be the indicator for who wins the game. But just kind of lastly, I would just say, what an important game for the SEC conference because like you said, A&M's outcome, kind of helps Auburn control their own destiny. It also impacts Alabama, potentially because, they're kind of breathing down. A&M's breathing down Alabama's back because they have that tiebreaker if Alabama were to drop one more game. And then the other angle is that the winner of the A&M Ole Miss has a good chance to make it to a New Year's Six Bowl, which would be huge for both programs.
That's right. Sadly, due to the nature of Ole Miss's losses being to Auburn and A&M, their road to hoe to getting to the SEC championship is tough. But they can still have a great season when they get to a New Year's Six game, which you look at where they started at, that's a success. And with Lane Kiffin being in his second year, I think that's a really great thing to build on. And that's something that, when invariably all the calls start coming at the end of the season with people wanting him, you can use that as a selling point for stay here in Oxford, look what you've already done.
And it's also huge. If they could go 10-2, you would think they would probably get the Sugar Bowl bid potentially.
I think you would. People love Lane Kiffin. He's exciting. He gets eyeballs on the screen. I think the best available bowl game Ole Miss can get, they'll give it to him.
And imagine if they got the Sugar Bowl and go 10-2, maybe win it, go 11-2. Suddenly the Sugar Bowl's, at Arch Manning's backyard in New Orleans, you have a good chance to pick him up. So I think it's huge for recruiting battles for Ole Miss to win this game tonight.
That's right, man. Well, hotty toddy, and I hope we get it done. And thanks everybody for listening to our special D&J Game Day edition. And you can, of course, follow us on Twitter at DJ Sports Show. Catch all of our episodes on Spotify. Look up the Dan and Joe Sports Show. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Dan and Joe Sports Show YouTube channel. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.